Is the TV angle okay for you
Yeah,
guys?
I'm good. Might need to close this,
Glare.
yeah. Okay, so we should have these then, I'm assuming that's one.
I just kept everything that you guys had when I was sick and not here,
Okay.
I didn't know where you stopped and started, and I just figured whenever we end, then I can ask you, are we sending any of these for parent feedback, or,
Okay. Okay, so what are we starting with? No. I don't know, I'm trying to gather, because remember last time I brought the wrong folder? Yeah. So I'm trying to make sure I even have everything. One binder that's just like 3,000 policies.
I'm sorry. Okay, there's a lot of stuff.
Been working on lots of stuff. Been doing this for a while. And I like to keep what we had, and then because then sometimes I can help remember why did we make that change.
It gives you that historical perspective.
Yes, I don't want your updates because you take over your city. So we pushed the 112OP because we want to incorporate the statute, no. Was that?
You're
No.
talking about 1240?
1240, yes. We pushed 1240 because we want to incorporate what the statutes say, so that way people have a clear understanding why we do, why the board does things like policy, because it's their requirement per statute. And there's so much, and it's spread out throughout the statutes. So,
Are we gonna hold off on that one?
I don't know if we're holding off, but given that the amount of references on the other, it seemed more prudent to get, because we're so far behind. I mean,
And remember, this isn't, the 3200 isn't all encompassing of all those cross-reference, like there's a whole nother probably 15, this was a.
it's like a big spider web.
I know.
Policies are just like a big spider web.
But I think this is the right approach, so that we're
Okay, so
tackling
we're
them all at the same time, but
I
keeping it
agree.
in sync.
I agree. So are we going to 3330? Because that was the one you had, we had reached, yes, we reached out to ISBA, which
Didn't help any.
no, and I'm a little frustrated.
And then we had the discipline with students and disabilities.
Yeah, that was frustrating as well. Because I had asked Dr. Meyer to reach out to Kelsey Badger, because I thought she would be great. And what she sent back was just the hyperlink to what ISDU referenced. But when you read that, there's nothing in that that's policy. It's just
It's just a
to
reference.
create this, you should do this or do that. So nothing's been created. And I don't know if you want to just do something to it or work with Kelsey on it. Because I mean, I appreciate the hyperlink, but that doesn't solve the problem. I don't want to send parents on a treasure hunt.
Right, so, Kelsey and I actually did talk about this, so if you, I don't really understand the intent of ISBA to do it, this is a new policy, because if you look at chapter 12, it's pretty all encompassing, I think it's like 20 pages
Okay.
of all references related to student discipline as it relates to a student with disabilities.
Okay.
So, we can't have a 20-page policy, so that's chapter 12 is all student discipline. So that's the piece that, and I think ISBA, again, I don't know why they did that, but I would assume it was just so that they're spotlighting that students with disability typically fall under a different category as it relates to disabilities with that manifestation piece.
Okay. How does,
There were other districts, so here's American Falls, no. That I thought did a fairly, they pulled out, a lot of them did exactly what you guys
Right.
did, just put the link. But there were some, and of course I closed all those tabs.
I didn't find many that changed it, it was the same, so.
Yeah, that, okay, so Coeur d'Alene, I thought did a good job of pulling out, the bigger overarching things, like here's how we handle suspension with these students, here's how, mainly suspension, expulsion, and then their legal
we didn't have for this. So at least they give, and I think maybe that's more what parents might, I mean, I don't know, but I think those might be the bigger things that they would look for, or maybe we just grab, like you're saying, a very high level, maybe the top things that might be dealt with, suspension, in school, however things are handled in school. I think parents need to be aware of how we use those rooms. I don't even know what we refer to them now. The rooms where if the child's having behavior issues, or maybe they're.
So we have separate policies for that. That's specific to our seclusion and restraint. So we have
Okay,
a
right.
policy specific to that, and there's actually procedures specific to that that outlines when and when
So
you
we
cannot
should
be.
use this policy then, I would think, to reference those policies, you know,
Okay.
so that the, cause I do remember an incident up at Athol where the parent had no idea that their child was spending time in one of those rooms. And you know, of course, that's probably not the norm, but at least if it's all tied together.
So what if I play around with a draft that kind of pulls out the bigger things, and
Yeah.
then I still think it would be helpful if there was at least a table of contents, like
Sure.
as a reference, and I can either put that at the top or the bottom, and we can wordsmith that piece of it.
Sure.
And then I pull out some of the big things, and then you guys look at it and see, yes, I think this is big, or can you include this as well? And at least it will reference. I would think that this should reference anything related to students with disability,
Sure.
or anything related that we know that it would more apply to students with disability, like the seclusion and restraint.
Yeah.
Not that you wouldn't do that with if there was
Right.
imminent danger with another student, but it tends to be more on the other end. So, and then all those policies are cross-referenced. Does that
Yeah.
work? Okay.
Yeah, perfect. See, that's, I think, where we needed your guys' expertise,
Yeah.
cause like, we're like, you know, I mean, that's, you guys have all that knowledge and
Yeah.
how it works and doesn't work, and the manual changes, I would think, as other things change, so it probably wasn't ideal just to plop the manual stuff, because then we would be updating it every
The
time.
latest one was 2018, and I mean, they tend to make, I don't know how often they change it. I mean, I think it's every few years, but it tends to be based on case law and whatever
Right.
new things are happening, and then whatever is on the docket as far as issues related to students with disabilities. So then they'll put some updates in there. I do know well, at least when I first moved here, and I think they still do it every year, case managers, they have a training at the State Department specific to, like, you're going over all of those pieces, so you really
that would be awesome.
understand.
So we could put those references at the bottom. It's like, this is where we get this information from, and this is why, because here's
Yeah, I could even link in the training that we
yeah, here's the legal
Okay.
reference to all those things. I know that as time goes on, which you're obviously well aware of, that the federal government keeps adding more. You must say this, you must have this, this must exist on your website, you know. So I think it would be prudent for us, just
Okay.
for better community relations, to just include as much information as we can.
pull big ticket discipline stuff,
Okay.
and then have some type of table of content, so, and then, I can pull that out and
Mhm.
then have at least a link, so it's, instead of just the whole manual, it's just a link
Yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
each of those sections. So that there is a frame of reference, specific to that, and I can have Kels help me with that.
Yep, yep, and then, I don't know if you need or not, but I just, Cortland has some.
I'll look at their example.
Yeah, some stuff, it's very minimal, but, and it hasn't been updated or reviewed according to the online since 2014, but at least it's a start and things might have changed. That would
And the
be-
manual changed in 2018, not that it necessarily made
Yeah, they
changes
just.
specific to chapter 12, but.
Right, yeah. They're just referencing 504 of the
Mhm.
Rehabilitation Act and, anyways, you have all that knowledge, so all that info.
Okay, I'll play around with that and bring it back to us.
Okay,
I just didn't wanna start pulling from
Nope.
it until we had a chance to have some FaceTime and talk about it.
yep, nope, that's fine. And the other thing, I mean, and I know we've mentioned this before, and I know it's a brain leap, but we are just like regular community members when we're in here.
You know, it's just,
The trustee hat sits outside.
Yeah. We're just trying to.
Because nobody else wants to come, so.
Right.
Love to pass the baton.
So.
Although I do love doing this, but.
So 43, in talking about the 3360, 4320 is the disruption of school operations. Well, I guess that's something different. I'm just looking at what it's referencing. I guess, okay, never mind, that would not be.
Okay, so I gave you comments on 3360, just so you know.
okay, perfect.
So that was 3360.
So when you look at it, don't be like, why did you do that? Well, it's
No,
because.
that's
yeah,
perfect.
I just put comments on it.
And I'll just get a draft going, and then I'll have Kelsey look at it as well.
Yeah.
And then I'll bring it and we can.
And honestly, if there's so much content that, we don't wanna give 20 pages, even if we tell parents, if the conduct behavior or whatever, if your child does this, then that, and
So
give
that
them
came
or something, so they can get more context. But I don't like giving parents feedback.
Right. That's what I think, I just wanna weed through how much of it is procedural specific to the case manager and then how it directly impacts the parent, and then
Right.
maybe pull out the parent pieces, cause the procedural pieces, they don't necessarily need to know that piece. Because the outcome is gonna be they'll see that piece, so, I think there's a way we can wade through some of that, and then even if I pull out chapter 12 and break it apart into a Word doc, and so at least we can put a table of contents. So if you're looking at something specific to manifestations, then it's just the link of manifestations. It's not chapter 12 and then scrolling.
Right, and I think too, because me and my simplicity of, if this is the discipline of students with disabilities, the discipline that I think we're looking at is in respect to the code of conduct that we have for every student. So that's to me what we're looking at. Now if there's students with disabilities that have code of conduct expectations that are not the same as a student without disabilities, well then I think that needs to be identified on here. So
So there's clarity.
yeah, I don't think I don't think it's this big mountain that we have to climb, but I also, because the main paragraph, I'm like, well, this language shouldn't even be on the policy,
Right.
because it's language to us. It's not language to the
Well,
parents.
I thought it was interesting that they even did it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but I'm like, I'm just gonna give it to them and then we can decide, cause it is
Oh,
new
she
and
pulled
it
it
was
up. So yes.
what they did.
So I rewrote the bold policy, the bold worded statement, because to me it was intimidating and ugly. And then that second paragraph is specific to us. It's not specific to parents.
Well, and in one of the policies, they just said disabled students. They used all kinds of really old school terms that are, not parent friendly. So,
Well, and I I think we can do better.
Right, I agree. So I'll play around with it and
Perfect.
then have Kelsey look at it as well. Cause it is an interesting policy.
Yeah.
But I think their goal is to have some transparency with those, so that makes sense.
Why can't I not go there? There we
Okay. So that was 3360, which actually came from 3340. So do we want to back up to that? Or, let's see, where are we on the front? So the 1240, do you want to save that one, Michelle, for you and I just to go through? Maybe we do that next week when everybody's gone. Sorry.
No, you're okay.
I'm just trying to get back to where we're moving backwards. The one we just talked about, the 3360 was a cross reference from 3340. So I don't know if we want to go to that one, the corrective actions, and save 1240 for you and I to go through, since it explicitly deals with board duties, you know, trustee duties.
Oh, you mean save the board duties for you and, yep, yeah, that's fine, perfect.
We can do that the Friday, cause, I mean, not that we don't need input, but I'm just saying that's sort of in the.
Right, we need to draft it
That's
for
your
the
wheelhouse.
trustees.
Yeah.
Not ours.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
You know,
fine, yeah.
So we can do that, and then maybe even during that time, you know, cause I like to make all these plans, but would be nice to do we might be able to,
Sorry.
fit in, no, you're fine, fit in the board norms and
Oh, yeah.
protocols, cause it all sort of
It might
is
get some
together.
overlapping as well.
Yeah.
Just in case, now I can't reach the thing. There we go. Okay. So, shall we, did we do 3330?
That's what I was gonna ask you.
I think we did do, didn't we bring that to the board, Janelle, 3330?
We haven't done
Yeah, we
3330 to the board,
No.
no.
Okay,
And it's lots of pages.
oh yeah, that was the discipline.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So we started it at one point, it looks like,
Yeah.
It's a long one,
yeah.
and there's a lot of legal references.
Oh, but this was the one that you sent. We did look through this. Okay, the biggest thing is we have to, there is some correction that needed to come. But then we asked for ISBA
Oh, yes,
to put the federal references, and they said they can't.
Right, I saw that. And then you guys asked Lisa to give you some feedback, and she
Okay, and she
responded
did.
to the comments.
Yeah, she did. So, do we want to read through it? I mean, what are we going to do about the lack of federal references?
yeah, well, there is the gun-free
Oh, wait.
and the firearms on this one.
Yeah.
So which one did I, let me see.
This one has the firearms, gun-free, and 504.
And it should be, let me do these, this is easy. Check these, I don't want to keep it this way, that's okay. Control X. There we are.
So I asked them about 3370 and 3200. That was their response to those two policies. Search and seizure, oh yeah, that's right. 3200.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which one are you working on, Michelle? The draft?
Yes.
From 3330.
Who did all these stupid tabs? Oh, yeah, that's so ridiculous.
When we get down to Lisa's comment, can we talk about that piece? Just so we can make sure that it's what you guys want it to be.
Yeah. That's fine. instead of 7. Sorry.
Good job.
Rid of a whole page. Okay, so are you reading through it, Ramona?
I got sidelined by some other things.
All my clickings. Okay, when there has been no intent to harm found, the building admin has facilitated this meeting, not district office admin. We need to adjust our practices to match this language. Okay. Is that one of the comments you wanted to talk about? Okay.
So typically this happens more than you think. I would say at least a couple times a year. I mean, we'll have first graders that have gone with their grandpa and they bring a pocket knife to school and there's literally no harm, but you know, sometimes they turn it in, sometimes they don't, somebody gets wind of it. So when it's that kind of a scenario, we always do a show cause hearing or a re-entry hearing, and we bring parents in and just have a conversation about, well, we need to make sure, you know, we do put kind of a behavior plan in place, but it's, you know, I mean, it's more
Mild.
than just, right, yeah, well, and it's all positive
It's
stuff, like-
learning the that every choice has a consequence.
right, and
Yeah.
just really understanding, like, this is a super big deal,
Mhm.
because they're little people.
Right.
It doesn't typically come to the district level. Now, I did sit in on a district level one last week at a building because it was a little person and they had the blade out and they were running and no intent to hurt, but still running, and I mean, they could have been
Intent to hurt themselves.
right. So then it was, you know, and this, you know, just having the parents understand the magnitude of, well, you know, and so I don't know if how we have it written, it says district office. That feels like it's pretty steep, and for parents it feels, it is, oftentimes it's pretty innocent.
Okay, so
I've never had a non-innocent kind of, I've never had an intent situation in my 8 years as a building principal. It's always the accidental grandparent, dad, you know, we were hunting or whatever. So I've never had, not that other principals haven't had something different, but most of the time it's accidental.
Okay.
And it's in their same pants that they went, you know, hunting with.
Right.
Is mine I eat in front
You gotta eat when you can eat.
Yeah. Okay, well,
deflated enough to eat anyways.
what I don't, first of all, I think in this little blue paragraph here,
Blue paragraph, can you spell it there for me?
So that's from the old policy.
Okay.
right, it is, and that was kind of where, I guess my frustration is, okay, so. It says, in the event that a knife is found to have been accidentally brought to school. That word accidentally should not be there
I
because
agree.
we don't know.
Until you've done your investigation of
Yeah.
intent.
So we are going to
Because we have had scenarios where it's a 4th, 5th, or 6th grader that brought a knife to school, knew they were bringing it, there was no intent, but.
Yeah, or they're bringing it for show and tell because they're like so
Right.
happy about it. Well, they didn't accidentally bring it, they brought it.
Right.
So-
Again, no intent.
Right.
But, no ill intent at least, but yeah, we've had show and tell situations.
Yes, and I don't necessarily know that accidentally is the pivotal point in any of this. So it's in the event,
In the event a knife is brought to school,
a knife is found to have been brought to school. In the event a knife, yeah, it should just be is brought to school. building administration is able to clearly determine the absence of any intent by the student to harm him or herself or others.
Because I don't even know that we have to say formally call this a show cause.
No, because that was old language that, because that's what I was like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, that just muddies the water.
Well, I guess previously, like years ago, they did show cause hearings, which that was.
My first few years as a principal, that's what we did.
Or being recorded. I forgot about that. I need to sign clearly. Yeah. Okay. And the building administration is able to determine. I just really, I don't like the subjective language. Because, you know, if a parent thinks that, you know, clearly, but the administrator's like, no,
Right.
we've got a problem. So is able to determine the absence.
Well, would it be helpful here to, I mean, there is an investigative process, and so do you just reference through investigation is able to determine the absence of an intent?
Okay,
Because
so-
you're going to talk to people, you're going to, you know,
So here's an idea.
it's not just a, I like this kid, so.
Like we did with the other policy, what's the building process? Because I don't even know if any of this aligns with how buildings maneuver through incidences with respect to
Okay, so
this.
I can think of 3 different scenarios that happen, and I'm just trying to walk through if we would do it differently. So we had a situation a couple weeks ago where a little person found a knife, didn't report it, and then was running around with it. The investigation is the same in the sense of you're gonna pull in all of the students that were involved that saw it, you're gonna ask questions, you're gonna have written documentation of what happened, you're gonna talk to the student, you're going to call parents and let them know that you found this. Again, all of that is documented, and then through all of those scenarios, from every lens of all the people that were involved, make a determination of you feel like there was intent, was there a threat made, where it was the student trying to jab with it, was it a just in my pocket kind of a thing, was it ever exposed, those kinds of things. That would be the same if they found it, because we've had that happen, as well as bringing it. If they bring it, and let's just say they're riding the bus, we'll talk to the bus driver, we will talk to kids on the bus, but it is subjective in the sense of you gather all that information and then try to make your best determination if the student, and obviously talking to the student, unless there was a verbal threat made or a physical act. But then sometimes, like I can think of a couple of first graders, they're playing with it. So then it's swords, it's Star Wars.
Yeah.
So a physical act doesn't necessarily, even though,
Yeah.
black and white, this kind of gets gray, because does it look different if it's a 5th grader versus a kindergartner?
Right.
Because do they understand?
Okay, so.
So we always investigate and talk to everybody, all the players involved, and then try to make our best determination. I often called the parents at this point before we did anything, just to get a sense of, did they know, is there a background story that plays a part in the overall investigation. And then typically, whenever this happens, there is a phone call to either Dr. Meyer, Lisa, or myself, and they'll run it by us. If it's at all questionable, Lisa and I both then run it by Dr. Meyer. And then we collaboratively decide next steps. But we really do try to bring parents in this mix, because
Alright, so in the event a knife is, and see what I don't,
to say if a knife is in the possession of the student, so this doesn't matter?
Hold on.
I mean, I guess it kinda does if they brought it versus.
Oh, firearm. Because I think when we start targeting certain things, like just a knife, well then what happens if it is a BB gun, or a, you know, a gun?
Yeah. Is it a paintball gun? Is it a, yeah.
Yeah, because I don't want it so narrow that
Mhm.
we're in this little box and people can't do their jobs, and now we just
Right.
open the district up for
Well, and
problems.
not given some discretion. I mean, what we hear all the time whenever I call parents, 9 times out of 10 is, you know, we're North Idaho, we've been hunting, we've been,
Right.
and all of that's factual. And so
Right.
most of the time, I've never had a situation where it hasn't been innocent. But I'm also elementary, so.
Well, and you know, it's, however, okay. Do we have anything that says children cannot bring pocket knives to school?
It's in our, student handbooks. Because they're not allowed to bring like water guns or any of that unless it's.
But I'm wondering if it's also that way at the high school. That's what I was gonna, where I was gonna go, because I'm wondering what the language is in there, that if we can adopt it into the policy, then it's uniform.
I'll pull it up right now. I'll pull up Timberlake. It's gonna reference the policy.
I'm trying to even find the student handbook.
It's under resources. I'm
Okay.
looking at Timberlake's, I don't know
Okay,
if you're.
I went to Lake, I was gonna go to Lakeland's, which they should be uniform, but,
Mhm.
so bringing harmful objects to school will not be tolerated. I like the word harmful object, okay, so,
What is it what is it titled under?
it's titled under severe inappropriate behaviors.
What page are you on?
I'm on page 17.
Okay, so on page 10, in Timberlake's, it says toys of violence. We ask that no toy weapons be brought to school for any reason. This includes not bringing them for show and tell.
Okay, towards
So
the
that's its
lines.
own, that's on page 10.
Alright, I'm gonna go.
Maybe we need to copy and paste all that language, even though it's mumbo jumbo, into the document and then rewrite it.
And then on page 13 for Timberlake, yeah, I think we could, I actually probably have the originals. But it says gun, ammunition, knives, fireworks, and other dangerous items are not to be brought to school by students. Any student who brings a weapon as defined by federal law on a school property shall be subject to expulsion from school for a period of not less than 1 year. after the date of the initial. Teachers and principals are authorized to confiscate. It is our hope that inappropriate behaviors will be few, enabling us to focus on positive, praiseworthy actions of all students.
Yeah,
Okay,
that
where was
language
that at?
needs to be
That's on
changed.
page 13 in Timberlake's
Of Timberlake's what?
handbook. And they actually list dangerous items, use and or possession of, and they reference policy 3330.
Okay, so you're under,
So what's the good line is? So they reference it here.
I have a different page 13. Cause that's on page 17.
So did they put some other discipline or some
Dangerous
other
items
thing specific to
and
their
or
school?
Possession of. See, here we have severe and inappropriate behavior, cause I searched pocket knife. Cause that's what I was looking for.
Okay.
And we have bringing harmful objects to school, pocket knives, bullets, laser pointers will not be tolerated. So you're
See if I go down if there's more.
due process, technically.
Yeah, my 17 is different than yours.
Well, that's not good. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, and that,
Yeah,
'Cause it's a
you-
link.
You go straight to.
Or I downloaded it. Go ahead.
oh,
You go straight to sex offenders, right, after suspension and expulsion?
Suspension and suspension. Wait.
Cause I have severe and inappropriate behaviors, they reference 3330 again, and then it jumps to suspension and expulsion.
Yes. Yeah. We're, and
I'm
you're
gonna
on
override
page.
this so you guys can see mine big,
Okay.
and then you can reference hers too.
can you click on those 3 dots over there by the, printer, yeah, and go to document properties?
And this is Timberlake's.
21, 22. So it was, September uploaded there and modified, okay? So that's the one you have, Lynn, can you click on the,
The
3
3
dots.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and yours is Google Docs _1, that's why, they're 2 different documents, see your name, Google Docs _1, and the
Oh.
one that Michelle's looking at is just,
Official student handbook PDF.
yeah.
Cause I went to the website.
That's
and
what I did, I went here, I went to, if I go back to Timberlake, I just went to resources and went under handbook,
Okay,
and
so.
it's right here, and then I click on it,
Oh wait, I'm on LHS.
and I went to Timberlake.
Okay, but we're gonna, oh, well,
We said that,
okay.
I
and
thought
you
they
were gonna
the
look at
same.
Lakeland.
I thought they were gonna be, well, I thought the language, cause they brought, I remember them bringing that, very bland book.
Mhm.
And then we had said, you know, you guys have the right to, but I thought when we were talking, and maybe that was our mistake in not clarifying, but when you're referencing policy, everybody's language should be universal.
Right.
It shouldn't be subject to interpretation.
And that's how Chrissy did it for elementary, so all of ours, like she did one doc for us, and then all of us literally copied and pasted it, but I thought, and I wasn't a part of that conversation, but I thought that you wanted, because the schools were different, I thought you wanted their handbooks to be more individualized, but that wouldn't necessarily play out with policy, obviously.
No, I mean, but
Well,
and
that's
when
what they brought to the board initially, sorry for interrupting,
Yeah.
but they told us that that's why they liked the differentiation, and we were fine, but then the next year when they brought the handbooks, they brought this cookie cutter, no differentiation for individuality. We were like, oh, we thought you said,
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess what stuck in my head was I know Timberlake does a hat day. I mean, they're big
Right.
on their hats. And so in my mind, it's like, well, y'all can keep that individuality within your student handbook. But when you're referencing policy, everything should be uniform. You can't go off on your own tangent and say what you want to say despite what the policy says, because then you're interpreting something that's already been interpreted.
So do you feel like it would be appropriate for the two principals to get together? Cause, well, maybe three, I'm gonna have to pull up Mountain Views, but, and the moment we start referencing policy, that whatever the little narrative or the synopsis underneath it is 100% the same. So if one person likes their language, like we're just merging it and putting the best, and then they're putting that together, and then they can bring that to you guys, or I can bring it to you and you can look at it. I feel like that would be helpful.
I'm not sure. I'm gonna pull up their handbook to see, because I mean, it's,
Well, I think the synopsis should definitely be policy language.
right.
But that's another thing, we're sort of getting sideways on our.
Yes, we are.
We're going off on a tangent. The rabbit
We do
hole.
that a lot.
That's what happens with policy, right? So back to our,
Well, and see, this in here lies a problem, because if one school's identifying one thing and another school's identifying another thing, that's not uniformity, but it all should be uniformity, meaning maybe the two of them need to add each other's language, so everybody has the same consistent.
And that's what I said,
language.
we bring them together, but in all fairness, what should happen, if we're referencing policy, the synopsis should probably reference it, to Ramona's point, and so if there's language that you like in either, like, we should put that in the policy, and then we're saying this is what your synopsis is gonna be, don't you think?
Okay.
I mean, not that I wanna tell them what it, but they're saying the same thing, they both just worded it a little bit different, and the content's the same.
Right.
So is there a play on words that we like over the other, and then that's what we put in policy, and then, you know what I mean?
I'm not sure exactly, so show me your,
I'll go to the first one, mine was on page 7. It's right here. Well, not page 7. Maybe it was 13, I can't remember now.
Okay.
Right here, page 10, so they reference toys and violence.
oh, okay.
But see, here is another thing, and this is why I think we obviously didn't give clear instruction. I don't know. We meaning the board. We didn't. We weren't there. The board members didn't give clear instructions. Because even tardies in Lakeland and tardies at Timberlake don't speak the same language. And that should not be accurate. They should speak uniform language in the sense of, I guess there's always going to be the opportunity for them to assess their own situation, but the kids have to have uniform guidelines from school to school to school.
Right.
So,
And you can always put that qualifying language in there that just says, it's at discretion, or however you
yes,
wanna word that.
yes, which I don't know. So here's what I would like to see happen is
Okay.
right now,
Right.
not in August or whenever, because as a board member, I thought, why would you wait until the very last minute to throw this together and then be offended because we weren't happy?
Mhm.
I mean, that just doesn't make any sense to me. I don't see why right
Well,
now.
we didn't approve it, it's not a matter of being happy.
Well, the board didn't approve it, you're correct.
Right.
We didn't approve what they did, and then we were kind of chastised because, of all the hard work that went in at the very last minute.
Mhm.
I shouldn't say I'm not a last minute person, because I am, but for something of this magnitude, why can't we fix it now and start working on next year so that there's some uniformity?
So what I am proposing, because, and not that, this is what elementary does, but elementary, we all come together like in April and May and go through our current, like all of our handbooks, and then we will point out, okay, this one is a little bit different because maybe it's like hat day, or we do something with PTU versus I call it PTO or whatever. but we kind of do a planning time, so, my proposal would be, we set that up for everybody, and Lisa can sit with the high school, and so as the point it starts referencing all policies, or even any of the other things, like then they're making theirs more uniformed, and then maybe highlighting if there is some building autonomy, then that's highlighted so you guys can see those distinct differences. Because that's similar to what elementary does, so we always leave the year with our handbooks done, like, we're done. I mean, we could give it to you in June kind of thing.
Right. And I was just gonna say that, Ramona, that this should go under discussion and the board should give direction.
Okay.
So that we, little committee members, aren't overstepping.
Okay.
Within the
So
committee.
I'm gonna hold off on anything until you
Please,
guys have.
yeah,
this
hold
discussion.
off, and then we'll bring it to the board for discussion, because I think the board needs to be made aware, because I don't wanna have the same conflict again this next year, and I don't think it's rocket science.
From a system standpoint, we could do it at the end and just go through it, and it's like we all come together and we kind of make it fun, like we go to lunch and just have some time together and go through it, and so that's kind of one of our, we don't leave for the summer until that's done, so that it's not on our plate in the fall, and it's.
Well, and personally, I think tardies at the middle at the secondary level, between middle school and high school, those need to be uniform. I mean, I can't imagine that there's that much of a transitional difference in expectations with tardies from elementary through senior high, but I don't know, I don't know. However, there does need to be some uniformity and consistency, because it shouldn't, there's no need for it to be this convoluted, and there still can be individuality between the schools, because they are different schools, and that's okay. But the language, especially for policies, it can't be altered, and it needs to be uniform. So we'll discuss this on the 13th board meeting. So please add that to the.
But bringing it back to 3330, is the language that one building used versus the other that you like? You liked Lakeland High School's verbiage with the harmful. Do we want that to be what's in the actual policy?
Well, see, it is in Timberlake's as well.
It's just somewhere different.
It's under severe and inappropriate behavior policy 330.
And 330 is referenced because 330 is referenced for dangerous items, use and or possession of, and then it's referenced again. So it's referenced like 4 times, it looks like, or 3 times.
Okay. So we have
Yeah, because here's severe and inappropriate behavior.
harmful objects. We have toys of violence. And you got toys of violence from Timberlake?
It's on page 10. Page 10 also, or page 19 at Timberlake also references laser pointers, which I didn't know that was a thing but maybe it is. I mean, I knew it was a thing, but that it was a concern.
We'll see, and Lakeland's toys of violence, I think says the same thing. We ask that no toy weapons be brought to school for any reason. This includes not bringing them for show and tell.
So it's the same, they just have it in different places and under different categories.
Well, they have theirs, Lakeland's is on page 9, Timberlake's is on page 10. I mean, and that I don't care. I just want to make sure that under these captions, because it appears that they're using the same subheadings, maybe not in the same order. I don't know, but all that language should be universal. And tardies was not. Okay, so let's see.
I just would think it's easier just to have a template and it's all in it's the same flow, and then you just attach it to your handbook.
Okay, they have guns, ammunition, knives, fireworks, and other dangerous items. So, guns, ammunition, knives, fireworks, and other dangerous. Oopsies. So there's 1, 2 is that one. Harmful objects, which are knives. Bullets. Laser pointers. Threats of violence. And 330 student discipline. Okay, so I'll go over here. Reference 330. Okay, so they have that. The same. That's guns. And okay, so it does appear
It's
that
the same.
they have the same 4 categories for 330, and that their language is
The same.
similar. Yeah.
Yeah, the content's the same.
Okay.
Is it a different play on words or the exact same play on words?
I didn't read all of the
Yeah.
words.
That's what I did too.
Okay, so in the event.
Where are we at now?
Well, I went through both schools, and they have policy 330 referenced 4 times. And in all 4 times that they're referenced, they have the same targeted words, such as harmful objects, pocket knives, bullets, laser pointers, guns, ammunition, knives, fireworks, or other dangerous weapons. Was it weapons? Other dangerous items. So they have.
So do we ban teachers from using laser pointers when they're teaching? This is a dangerous weapon. I mean, the language to me is just a little ridiculous.
No, a laser pointer is a harmful object. Okay.
Well, I said the same thing. I was like, I didn't know it was a harmful object.
Well, because you
I mean, what is a
can,
harmful
you
object?
know,
Don't bring a fork. I mean,
a spoon.
My husband has, he was a cop, so he was like, anything can be used as a
Right.
weapon, let's be honest.
right, exactly.
Chopstick.
I,
Pencil,
Shank.
yeah, I mean,
where did that come from?
that's that legal
You're
background.
watching Shawshank Redemption.
Okay.
Talking about forks and knives. Elsa shake.
I mean, in the toy weapon thing, I mean, I think there's a lot of subjectiveness, and it sounds like to me that there was a certain mindset that wrote the policy and not necessarily, it sounds to me like it was more of an ideologue instead of law or whatever. I mean, I just have a problem with a lot of those words that are in there. Especially when we're talking, I mean, I know the older students are a little bit different, but when we're talking about
Yeah.
little kids, like, you know, the elementary,
I, as a building principal, I wanted to have some discretion. I mean, it's a 5-year-old.
Right.
They even have a concept of,
right,
and like the child that was running, like, he had no idea he could get hurt.
right,
It was fun.
yeah, they're kids, they,
Right.
you know, they're the here and now, and that changes every 15
Right.
seconds, you know,
So
so.
sometimes that's adults too.
Right. Right,
Right,
so
so
I mean,
not taking a human element out of it either.
Did it do it on its own? I'm just curious, because if this is actually there, I'm gonna laugh. Oh, that's so funny, it did do it on its own. Okay.
yeah, I don't wanna get to the point to where it's so, you know, we're choking the life out of the people for making, it's not even a mistake, it's part of growing up.
Well, and I
Right,
used
I
to say
mean-
to all of my parents and my kids, like, this is the place where kids are supposed to make those mistakes.
Right,
Because there's all these
right.
loving adults that are gonna help them.
Right.
They're kids, they're going to make mistakes. We
Right,
make mistakes every day of our life.
yeah,
Now's when you wanna make them.
Right.
right. And I don't want it to be, I don't want to turn school either from their perspective into this thing to where
Right.
it's all about the punishment,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Well, and I think it's important that you're bringing parents in on this and just an understanding, and then
Yeah,
like with anything, that if it came to my level, I would always kind of call the parents and just say, this is the scenario, let's talk through what we think. You know your
Right.
kid better than I do, like, I want the lessons to be learned, I don't necessarily want the punitive approach, like,
Right.
I want them to understand the magnitude, whatever the situation
right,
is.
here's
So
the rule.
how do we
you
get the
can't
best
do.
outcome?
Right, yeah.
Did we get any feedback on this policy?
And see. Yeah, and I don't want to remove the discretion for whomever's in charge, right? Because they know the totality of the situation, and even optics are not necessarily the truth, you know?
Well, and the essence of who that child is.
Right, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, there's just so much that goes, I
But
just,
then you have to play devil's advocate, and you have the other side where parents or the other parents want
Sure.
their child to, the school has to feel safe, so, I mean, this is a meaty one, cause it's hard to come at it from, we want to be able to protect this little child that is gonna make mistakes, but then ensure to everybody else that we're doing everything we can to keep them safe.
yeah.
I don't see any feedback, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't given, just means
Look
that-
here, maybe it's in.
On Derby 330,
Yeah.
from parents, you mean?
Yeah.
Remember, we didn't send this one out yet, so this is a
Oh,
new
okay.
draft of, we were gonna put a draft together and then send out. We don't have feedback on any of these policies yet.
Okay,
So once we have a version,
okay, then we send it out for their feedback.
so remember when we first did this, the cross-references
Yeah.
from 3,000 and the cross-reference from 8,500 we got feedback on, but this particular,
Okay, so when we send out our revised version, we should be sending the original and the revised version so they can see
we
what.
can.
I think that would only be fair
Yeah.
in being transparent. It's like, this is the current policy,
Mm-hmm.
these are the changes, this is how we're going to change it to read. Or this is what we're gonna recommend changing the policy to.
So current.
So they can see it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cause we haven't done this process yet, so
Right.
the first one we did and all the color coding was just too much.
Disaster,
And so we
yeah.
talked about just giving them the clean version, but some people do like to see that historical perspective, so we can try the current versus revised and then see if the feedback is more positive
Okay,
outside of the color coding, so.
gotcha. So in the event a deadly or dangerous weapon, firearm, or other harmful objects are brought to school or found on school property but not reported, the building administration will proceed with its investigative process.
I like that because we definitely have had kids where they like, first thing in the morning, they check their pockets when they get to school and they realize and they'll go right to an adult and say, oh, I left this in my pocket, here you go. I don't, you know,
Mm-hmm. No, I hear you. So after the investigative process, it's been completed. What happens after the investigative process? Maybe we should delineate what the investigative process is. I mean, I don't know.
interviewing participants and getting written documentation of each person's account or what happened, whatever the incident is, that's kind of the investigative process.
Okay.
I typically include parents in that process.
Well, parents should always be included.
Mm-hmm.
So after the investigative process has been completed, what happens then?
Depending on the scenario, well, whenever there's anything like that, it's they'll typically call, elementary will call me, secondary will call Lisa. If it's pretty black and white, then it's a done deal and we'll just give Becky a heads up.
So part of your investigative process is notifying the district office, okay, so. Proceed with investigator and notify the district.
Which could include Kelsey, if it's a student with a IEP.
Which you mentioned about there, above that, there was a section that addressed 504s and
Because if it's a situation that we'd have to start looking at a manifestation situation, then Kelsey has to be involved in that.
to call cops on everything. Drives me nuts. It's always such a huge threat.
What? I've not been signed out. Still me? Reconnecting. See what I really think, oh, this is taking forever, okay. What I struggle with is, okay, we have possession of a weapon on school property, misdemeanor. So we basically go through statute language, we say what a dangerous weapon, firearm is. Any person who possesses, carries, or stores a weapon in a school building or on property except as provided below, shall be referred to law enforcement for immediate prosecution. The board may grant persons and entities, whatever. But then we go into in the event, which isn't part of possession of a weapon on school property dash misdemeanor. Maybe, although actually, I guess, why do we have to say it's a misdemeanor?
Red is our new language, right?
Yes, yes. Okay, so I'm gonna take this off, 'cause I don't think it's relevant to the paragraphs below. It talks about what's gonna happen if you have possession, and it does say that, they're gonna be referred to law enforcement for immediate prosecution, as well as, face disciplinary action by the district. Why do we have to say that? Because law enforcement doesn't prosecute them. Law enforcement addresses the situation and they either cite them or they don't. I don't think,
Is that though, let me look up if that's any federal.
reference.
Mm-hmm. You know what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
What are we trying to
Well,
look up?
because it states shall be referred to law enforcement for immediate prosecution.
Yeah.
So I want to take that for immediate prosecution out because we don't know what law enforcement's going to do and we can't
Right.
tell them what to do.
Right.
Because, and this whole section is titled possession of a weapon on school property, misdemeanor. Well,
So the way it's titled, and this is Idaho statute, it just says possessing weapons or firearms on school property, and then it does not say misdemeanor, but it says it shall be unlawful and is a misdemeanor. But that's not part of the title.
And I like the firearms, explosives, and other deadly weapons instead of somebody's perception of whether a toy is dangerous or not. I guess, was that in this or that was in the handbook?
in the
Toy
handbook
weapon?
was toys of violence. So it's not necessarily a weapon, but they're toys of violence.
G.I. Joe could be considered
That's right.
Opinion, that's not.
An army tank could be considered a toy of violence. If you have an extremely,
Well, I think Barbie
passive-
can be violent against women's psyche. I used to run mine over. I mean,
It's okay. I distorted my children's images because I wouldn't let them play with Barbies, but they could play with
Right.
Brat dolls.
I
These
had
enormous
brothers.
heads.
I have brothers, so we played G.I. Joe and war, and you know we shot at the Barbie dolls.
right.
We didn't.
So, I mean, yeah, but that was a handbook thing, right?
It's okay. I had a dog that wanted to mount our dog that died. Wanted to have the dog stuffed and mounted, or at least keep the head or the fur. And like, no, the dog's going in the ground. But she was raised with, we don't waste animals. You don't. If we hunt it, we use every piece of it. If we raise it, there's a reason for it. I mean, it's just so.
Yeah.
But it was pure innocence in her mind because she's like, I love this. Oh, we all love the dog. It's the best dog around.
What paragraph was that you were in? Cause I was up at the top reading through the,
I'm on page 5-ish, 4 and 5. The bottom half of 4, top part of 5.
I'm not seeing anything that says you have to say prosecution. But I'm gonna.
So there, so where? Policy.
I've been scared to jump.
yeah, we should probably turn those speakers down. So up under, while you're looking at that, so up under gun-free zones on, page 4, it says, no person shall possess a firearm or other deadly, maybe that's not it, hold on.
It's under possession on school property.
Gun-free zones, it says a student who possesses, controls, or transfers a firearm or any object that can reasonably be considered to be da-da-da. Do we really need the word reasonably? Or does that
You're
come-
under gun-free zones?
Yeah, or does that come directly out of the law? Well, let's see. Reasonably be considered. I mean, reasonable is
Subjective.
well, it's very argumentative when it comes to the law. Objectively reasonable. So I guess I have to go, let me go back here and look at the terminology. Specifically talking about firearms.
Okay, so I think,
So, I'll reverse the basis that although the display of what appears to be a firearm, quote, requires a display of something that could reasonably be perceived as a firearm, and there is no requirement that the object. I gotta read the case. Well, I guess we can leave it. That's interesting. That's crazy. So there was a case that went all the way through appeals in New York, and there was a opinion in the court, and they reversed the decision, although it went back and forth a couple of times. It says the appellate division reversed on the basis that although the display of what appears to be a firearm, and this is quote, requires a display of something that could reasonably be perceived as a firearm, there is no requirement that the object, be anything other than the defendant's hand.
Wait,
That's,
read that again?
yeah. This is reasonably perceived as a firearm.
That's where we are.
Yeah, requires, it says the appellate division reversed on the basis what the jury had put in place. Because the person never brandished a weapon, but because he made, put his hand on his vest as though he may have one. Anyways, so the appellate court reversed it on the basis that although the display of what appears to be a firearm, and this is their quote, requires a display of something that could reasonably be perceived as a firearm, comma, there is no requirement that the object, whatever, be anything other than the defendant's hand. People versus Lopez. Yeah.
How is that reasonable?
So, but I guess my question would be was he first, I mean, if they're reversing the decision, what was the main decision? Was the first decision that he was prosecuted and charged and is convinced of a crime, and then the Supreme Court is reversing that, or was he not convicted? And then
He was not convicted of the crime of the actual having a firearm.
Yeah.
He was, quote, guilty of, he took somebody's boombox, right? And he did this on his jacket,
Yeah.
So they said he never displayed a weapon, whatever, so we can't charge him with the first degree robbery, blah, 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 but maybe second degree, and they reversed that and said, oh no, yeah, he's guilty because it could just be his hand.
Right.
The insinuation alone
You can have it in your
Yeah,
pocket.
insinuation
and
is
have your hand in your
that I've
pocket
got a gun.
and you
Well,
get
it doesn't even have to be in your pocket. If you did this to somebody, according to this, it said it needed to be nothing other than your hand.
Oh, wow.
That's what's,
Because you can perceive someone doing this as a real and imminent threat of danger, because you could, maybe they have one and they're warning you, and so now I'm terrified because
It's a gestural prompt of,
yeah,
yeah.
interesting. Okay.
Doesn't make writing this any easier.
No, and that's why I think, I mean, if there were more people that could just be more of a voice of the district, I could say, let's just not and move on.
Yeah.
That would be good, but we also have to remember, we can't make things so vague that people can interpret them and come after the district, because we have to protect it without infringing on student rights, staff rights, patron rights, anybody's rights. I mean, we don't want to create that environment either. So my compromise,
These can be polarizing.
they can be. So my compromise is in my possession of a weapon on school property. If we take out misdemeanor label, because I do think that all these paragraphs below are dealing with the possession of a weapon on school property. So the statute reads, the first paragraph, it shall be unlawful and is a misdemeanor for any person to possess a firearm or other deadly or dangerous weapon while on the property of school or in those portions of any building, stadium, or other structure on school grounds which at the time of the violation were being used for an activity sponsored by and or through a school in the state or while riding school provided transportation. I want to change that.
But that is exact language from.
It is, that is the statute.
Yeah.
But I want it to read, because this also has to be parent friendly. It shall be unlawful and is a misdemeanor for any person to possess a firearm or other deadly or dangerous weapon while on school property, in school buildings, at school events, or on transportation provided by the school. That should be not a.
That is way better.
yeah.
Okay.
Because
So
who's writing school provided transportation? That's so interesting.
well, you know,
Parents going on, I don't know,
Field trip.
Yes. Thank you.
Well, it's just, the verbiage is interesting.
Well, but
this
if you-
is better though.
Yeah, but if you think about it, if a parent goes with little Bobby on his third grade field trip to the pumpkin patch and he concealed carries, you know, the biggest, people just need to think, but not everybody thinks that same way. Which then leads into no person shall possess a firearm or other deadly weapon on school property or in those portions of any building, stadium, or structure on school grounds, which at the time of the violation being used, okay, so this is that, see, I knew I had read the paragraph, but what they left out was the section of it shall be unlawful and is a misdemeanor. So we can either add that to that paragraph if we want to keep it.
This is also delineating out though that it has to be a school sponsored event in that moment, because like if on a Saturday at 1 o'clock, if nobody's on campus, Timberlake or Betty Kiefer for that matter, it becomes a park. So you could take a weapon at that point if you wanted to. There's no school sanctioned event happening. I feel like that second paragraph kind of delineates that. Because it says at the time of the violation or being used for an activity. Are we saying any and all every time, or only when there's a school event happening? Because lots of, you have Park and Rec that uses
Well,
the
there's,
fields and-
right, there's so much that goes on,
Mhm.
I think there's a church that
Community events
uses
and-
the high school and, there's a lot of public happening.
Right.
Or like right now, there's soccer practices at
Mhm.
different schools for
Mhm.
Park and Rec
And we have documentation of that because they do a facility use request and we
Mhm.
have to approve it, but still, I mean, we have issues with dogs on campus at 6 o'clock during Park and Rec, and then their stuff doesn't get picked up,
So, we could simply add to this first paragraph and take my cute little highlighted paragraph out and just say, it shall be unlawful and is a misdemeanor for any person to possess a firearm or deadly. So we're taking that statute language. That is all statute language. What is not is this also applies to, that section afterwards is not statute language, but I do think it's a nice clarifier that, it's an expectation of people that don't attend the school as well, or students of other schools.
Yeah, when you're showing up to a basketball game and.
And see, I think by adding, it shall be unlawful and is a misdemeanor, we're saying that, we're giving the statute language, but then we're taking this whole, for immediate prosecution out. That drives me nuts. It's like, no, they're not, stop that. Okay, so for any person who possesses, carries, or stores a weapon in a school building or on school property shall be referred to law enforcement as well as face disciplinary action by the district.
I kind of feel like that's forcing you to take action. Would you take action in every scenario?
Well, we should be notified, we should have some kind of action. I mean, there should be, the board
It
should
should
be
be brought to your
aware.
attention,
Yeah.
but this kind of means that you have to take some disciplinary action versus.
Well,
Yeah.
technically, when it comes to firearm, we do.
Yeah.
And that is what we're addressing, any kind
Yeah.
of dangerous weapon or firearm, or,
Yeah, I guess because it does say in red, such a term does not include a pocket knife, so, you're right.
So, any person who possesses, carries, or stores a weapon in a school building or on school property, except as provided below, shall be referred to law enforcement and face disciplinary action by the district. The board may grant persons and entities advance permission to possess, carry, or store a weapon in a school building. All persons who wish to possess, carry, or store a weapon in a school building shall present this request to the board in a regular meeting. It is solely within the board's discretion whether to allow a person to possess, carry, or store a weapon in a school building. So redundant. What if, it is solely within the board's discretion whether to grant a person to possess, carry, and store a weapon in a school building. We're just redundancy. So I want to change that to permission is at the sole discretion of the board. Permission.
Yeah, you're saying the same play on words multiple times.
Granting permission. So granting permission is at the sole discretion of the board. So, but is that clear enough? I mean, am I recommending taking out pertinent language?
No, because underneath it then defines this, who it doesn't apply to, so I think it's fine.
Okay. Ramona?
What's that, sorry, I'm back at the whole dangerous, deadly weapon, any harmful object, I'm like, where are we?
The shank or the
Yeah.
fork.
Or the toothpick, those things are deadly.
Anything with a 5-year-old running around on the playground could be deadly, let's be
Yes.
honest.
Just sometimes their presence. They get under my feet when I'm in the kitchen, it's like,
I mean, it's all just sort of, and then when you go look, like this instance, it says other jurisdictions, have allowed for others, even more flexibility. A Texas court held in Stanel versus State that a floor could be considered a deadly weapon when the defendant's head is slammed against it. Okay. Anyways, go back to what you were asking me there.
Well, what I did was in following down through the chain, actually this should be red, not this. Okay, hold on. Okay. The board may grant persons and entities advance permission to possess, carry, or store a weapon in a school building. All persons who wish to possess, carry, or store a weapon in a school building shall present this request to the board in a regular meeting. Granting permission is at the sole discretion of the board. I added that language and removed. It is solely within the board's discretion whether to allow a person to possess, carry, or store a weapon, because it's just redundant throughout the whole paragraph.
Yeah.
And I get wanting to make it clear, but I think the permission to do this is at the sole discretion of the board, nobody else. So I think those words.
Well, sometimes just repeating yourself 3 different times just makes it a little muddier.
Well, and people stop listening.
Right.
Because it's like, oh, I already heard that.
Right.
Oops.
Yeah, so it seems just better.
Well, the A is between the that and the knife.
Yeah, it's like,
let's
does it
scratch
go
that.
in there or no?
Well, it was part
Oh, I
of
see, it's
these-
already there,
Yeah,
gotcha.
but I'm gonna take it, no, I'm taking
Oh.
it out. Okay.
So to your point, after the investigative process has been completed, and you've already said district administration has been notified, then would it just say, after the investigative process has been completed, the student may be referred for a reentry hearing? The outcome of this hearing will include a signed behavior contract, shall be presented to the board of trustees of the. And then
Well,
you
see,
guys
and
just have
here
to
is-
decide, do you want, how much of that do you want coming to you when it's a first grader, you know?
No, that's, I mean, but if, in policy, I believe it is that all reentry contracts are required to be presented to the board. They haven't been.
I was gonna ask you that question because I didn't know that.
Yeah, they haven't been. And it's not so that the board can, be like, what's going on?
Yeah.
But it is kind of for the board to be like, what's going on? What's the pulse of our community
I was
here?
gonna say, it's giving you a pulse.
It is, and it's helping us understand where we're at, where we may have holes in our policy, where anything's going on, but we know nothing.
It's how you can be proactive and preventative.
Yes, and so I think a situation that is completely handled at the building level, I don't know necessarily that needs to be brought to the board. However, if you're choosing to have a reentry contract or whatever those contracts are called, when you are applying a contract, we need to know about it. I don't care what grade level it is, because it's a contract. Those are binding, those are actionable.
And it says for the duration of the year on
Right,
it.
and the board knows
there is
nothing.
a piece of if these policies are not included or not followed through, that it used to say that it would come to the board, or I think now some of the language says it will be brought to the district office, so, because those reentry contracts are typically, we do them
But see, to
typically
me,
to a weapon or a.
and to me, the re-entry portion, that word means that child was removed from the school
Right.
and said, you're not coming.
Mhm.
What I continually hear is that we never not let them come. I mean, if we do in-school suspension, if we do this, we always want to keep the kid at the building that, there's,
Right.
and so if the consequence, I don't understand why we would be issuing, a re-entry contract if the child was never removed from the school grounds and expelled, because to me, that's what the re-entry is for an expulsion.
And I see it differently, only the reentry is where we're entering back into our normal environment, so even if I'm doing in school, they're not in their classroom, they're not necessarily going into the lunchroom, so reentry back is into normalcy. Cause to your point, I agree, I mean, I don't think in my 8 years, I may have done one OSS. Typically it would have been for these kinds of things, it would be an ISS, or it would be, if we had a nice situation and then the parent came and picked up the child and then the next day, sometimes if there wasn't an ISS attached to it, it was just, it's a first grader and, but I would just have the parents come in, and that's why when it used to be called that show cause, we're just talking about it, so, do we wanna say reentry, is it, do we have a different title for it?
Well, to me, and I mean, I guess I'm just kind of reflecting on the older kiddos, because when they're older, the error is pretty egregious that they're removed from school, their parents are called, they're picked up, they have conversations, it goes through its processes.
Right.
And then, obviously, if the administrator wants to re-enter that student, because to me, if you're going to the point of a re-entry, that is a significant occurrence.
Yeah, it's a major.
Yeah, so, and the board should know what's
Right.
going on.
So
Ugh.
maybe if it's a re-entry, I mean, it just gets a little bit muddy because elementary versus, you know, secondary. So, and it, even if we think it's innocent, if it's a, you know, a first grader that found a knife and was playing with it and didn't tell anybody, we get wind of it, I mean, that's the standard protocol is you have to do a re-entry even if there's no intent. And they may not have been removed from class, so the OSS and ISS isn't always, now I get probably secondary it is, but at elementary, it's a little gray there, they don't always attach that if there's no ill intent.
Right, so, but I guess what I hear you saying is that, you know, sometimes there is in school, sometimes there isn't. You know, it's just, it's a case by case basis, which it should be. I'm not saying it shouldn't.
Right.
But the labeling of a re-entry hearing, that to me is, or re-entry contract.
Signifies something
Contract,
more.
those words really bug me. But it signifies to me that if the behavior was that bad that we had to go down that road, then there needs to be accountability throughout the whole
Right.
district.
So do we scaffold that language a little bit, and so if we're seeing, you know, do we put kind of a trajectory of progression, so if it's a first grader, and again, it could be a fifth grader that's innocent, I'm just going based on what typically happens, it's
Right.
a little person. And we're not attaching OSS or ISS to it, it is innocent, then maybe it's just a behavior contract with the parent, or it's a behavior plan with the parents of just, or it's a note just saying that we are made the importance that you can't bring this to school, or use some type of documentation, it's not really even a designated plan. And then if you are gonna attach an ISS or OSS, that's a different story, and then maybe that is a contract that then the board's a part of. Well, it doesn't matter if it's at a district level or a building level, if you're attaching a removal from the class, from their normal environment, where then they're gonna be separated,
Right.
is that where then the board's involved, and we just change the title of the two?
Well, okay, so little Johnny comes, brings his little pocket knife, and teacher's like, you can't have that at show and tell, and you should go to the office. So he goes to the office, and you're like, oh, well, Johnny, we can't bring knives to school. We need to call your mom for pickup. So we call the mom comes to pick up the knife, and it's he wanted to bring it, I didn't know, little Johnny didn't know, nobody knows, we all know, now little Johnny goes back to class. Okay, to me that's not a major incident.
I agree.
But what I hear you saying is when that happens, from a building standpoint, my understanding would be that you need to document all that, okay? Is that documenting becoming that re-entry contract, which is the wrong word for that then? That's absolutely the wrong word. Because
Because
You
you
do-
do that innocent, what you just said.
oh yeah, no,
So
and
why
I get
do we
it.
remove the first grader
Right.
from
Right.
instruction?
You follow the protocol, which is he had to go to the office, he had to report in, found out what it was, principal's like, oh, buddy, we can't bring that to school, we gotta call mom. Mom comes down, sorry, we didn't know, Johnny didn't know, nobody knew, we all know now, and away Johnny
Right, there's
goes.
a conversation, so everyone
Exactly.
understands this can happen.
Right.
It all gets documented in Skyward.
Right, and the documentation is absolutely critical, but I don't know how that constitutes a re-entry contract. Because if there is a contract involved, people are signing, so
Yep.
everybody is aware of what's going on. Are parents signing when it's that innocent? That's interesting.
I
don't
think
know
it
what to
would
do
be
with this.
better to say no to that it's just, you know,
Yeah,
and again, is it defined as the moment there's intent, then it's a re-entry? Cause that's typically what happens, is that's when you're attaching an OSS or ISS, is when you can show that there's some intent. Somebody was mad about something, or somebody said something, or, you know, there was a threat made, then you're showing intent. Yeah, this is where it's a little gray.
input, Ramona? please.
I wasn't paying full attention.
So,
Hey,
so if that information has to be documented in Skyward, could there be a different kind of form, like a behavior adjustment evaluation or something like that? So documenting that, okay, we notified the parents, this was completely innocent, the child understands, the parents understand, and we can move on instead of it being considered a contract? If that's something that
We're
has
writing
to
the
be-
policy, we can have it say whatever we
Right.
want to say.
Right.
Well, if it has
With
to be
respect to
something
that,
documented,
though, if every building has its own protocols,
yeah,
that is more concerning to me
yeah.
than whatever language we put in this policy, because getting administrators to stop doing what they have been doing for 30 years is going to be more challenging than, in my opinion, than anything else.
Well, I feel like after some of the things that have happened as of late, and then Brooke and Lisa kind of put that, like we went over it with everybody. These are some things that you need to do. I actually don't think it will be that big of a deal, and I actually think, at least for the elementary, they would probably be more in agreement with, are we magnifying this situation and it's innocent, and more clarity, because right now everybody is like, this is, we have to do this, and sometimes it does feel like a hoop jump, if I'm being honest, because, you know, they're 5,
Right.
you know, or they're in 4th grade, but they literally just went camping with their grandpa.
Right.
Well, then,
You
do
know?
you have written protocol that each building is supposed to follow with respect to these types of incidences?
I don't know if it's written down. I'd have to look into that.
Well, it should be if you're giving it to all the buildings.
Well, I mean, we just talk about, like, you know, Lisa and Brooke wrote out all of that for your guys' stuff that just happened, some of the
Right.
bigger things.
Oh,
but
right,
for-
right.
But for elementary, it's just whenever there is a, you know, a knife or a weapon of some kind, you know, they're calling district admin, and then we're walking through that.
Well, maybe we need to
But it
have.
could be written down, and I just don't know it's
Okay.
somewhere else, and I just don't know that. So that could actually be the case.
Not a worry. Maybe we should, until we know what the protocols are, that everyone should be following universally. I don't want to miss something, and I don't want to create a new hoop. And I don't want to, you know, if people are jumping through hoops unnecessarily because of the protocols that have been put in place because of the way the policy was written.
I'm gonna pull up our admin handbook and see if it's documented that way. Cause if it is, then we have it. If we have it written down, it's gonna be there. But that's always what, that's always what I've had to do. I did, and because that's what I was instructed to do.
Right.
So let me just see. So here's the threat assessment protocol, crisis, reunification. Yeah, see here's student, this is just a copy of the contract. This is just a copy of an example of a contract, so it's not,
Has anybody, well,
I mean, here's a discipline flow chart to your point for special education. There's a manifestation flow chart. Let me see if it's listed under resources. I don't think it's written down. I think it's just, I mean, that's just the guidance.
yeah.
But maybe Lisa and Becky have something that I don't know about.
Well, and I guess my concern
I'll have this
is.
around for you guys. So you don't have to see my stuff.
That's fine.
I guess I would say where the documentation was is in our old policy, they used to call it that show cause, and so that's what people did. That's the documentation, is the old policy. Cause that's where it says there was an include a signed behavior contract. But reentry insinuates out of school suspension.
Did ISBA have a procedure that went with this, policy?
I don't think so, but I'll bring it on. Just gonna see if there's any updates to it. Sorry, I'm shaking this.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine.
It's 33:30.
I'm almost there. What?
Our new policy doesn't say that, does it? That's just unreasonable. What does?
No, no policy, no procedure or form. But they did update this 3330 policy in 21.
ISBA is the one that has like the misdemeanor language and all that too. So.
I don't like that language either.
What I'm reading?
No,
Okay.
the alternative disciplinary thing. I've made a couple of changes, but I highlighted them in level. In yellow, I took out the,
On this policy or a different one?
on this policy, the 3330.
At the bottom?
Yeah, well, they're
Yeah.
throughout it, so the traditional disciplinary measures, number 3 said detention, including Saturdays. That's just craziness. I mean, we can't expect a parent to have a child on a weekend show up at, you know, for detention. I mean, the parent isn't in school. And there's other things that come into play. I just don't see where the school district would have the authority to. I can see during the week, you know, school hours, school days. The other thing is the whole restorative practices to repair the harm done to relationships and persons from the students' misbehavior. I don't think is a school district's business. I think they're overstepping their bounds. And that's a whole nother ball of wax. I'm really against that because that should be a parent's issue. The school is here to educate, intervene to keep students safe, and that's it. The way it gets repaired, and that's all subjective too on whether somebody thinks that there's something that needs to be repaired. You know? Yeah, so I think that needs to be a discussion too. Yeah, the any disciplinary measure, like what is that? I mean, that's just open-ended.
I can't even believe it still says corporal punishment.
Right.
Okay. I don't necessarily know that this should be the flow, but I'm just trying to figure it out. Yeah, so I guess in my mind's eye, which I'm gonna have to wrap this up because I have another appointment. In my mind's eye, if a student behavior is handled by the parent coming into the office, the parent being well informed of what occurred, the parent retrieving whatever item shouldn't have made its way to school grounds, and the student is returned to its classroom, I don't understand why there is a reentry contract. To me, the reentry contract comes because of some form of removal from the school environment. And I don't know if, because in the reentry contract, I think we are identifying behaviors and expectations. So I don't, because in the bottom little paragraph there, well, there was somewhere where it tossed in the word behavior, that it's like, okay, the reentry contract needs to address the behavior and performance expectations. That's the contract. So if something is as significant that we've gotten to a reentry contract, then we need to, that needs to be referred to the board so that the board can see what happened. However, if we need some other type of form to document the occurrence, because we want a form, I have no problem, let's create that, so that there's an incident report, so that we know all the steps that were taken. And the copy of the incident report should be given, which again, that's a legal term, should be given to, the parents if we need, I mean, which it should, because if we can't be doing things that the parents aren't aware of, and we can't have children signing contracts because they can't be held to the expectation of that contract, their parent needs to.
So when there is a reentry, the students sign it, but the parents are with them, so they're not signing it outside of their parents.
The
Okay.
parent needs to sign it also.
They do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This whole contract word bugs me. The whole reentry contract, I get that concept, but if everything is becoming a reentry contract, I think that's wrong.
And I would tell you, it most of the time, almost every time, it's through the lens of a weapon, that there would be a reentry. But that being said, it could be that there's, again, it's anytime there's a removal, like, so I guess a threat would be the same, but, there are definitely, so, just, I'm all over the board here with my thoughts.
That's okay, I'm there with you.
The documentation happens in Skyward. So if you have a situation, we also then do that reentry contract, but we used to do a show cause. But if it happens in Skyward, parents are always notified. I mean, most of us have the rule, again, this isn't documented, I don't think, but our practice has always been at the moment, and it comes to the principal level, parents should always be informed, because as a parent, I'd wanna know that. And
Right.
so, good, bad, or indifferent, if the moment if it's beyond the teacher level and it comes to the principal or the assistant principal, parents are notified. And so in that piece, they are fully aware of everything that's happening. They don't necessarily get a copy of the Skyward documentation, because it's just a recount of everything that they've talked about. But yeah, I don't think it's a bad idea to have delineating out, maybe like a reentry is definitely a greater deal.
Right.
And we have other things, like we all have little restorative practice sheets that are just like, okay, what happened? Let's talk about it. And it's just our documentation of what you're doing and how we're supporting the student. I mean, that would be easy, so that you're not blowing up something that's a smaller deal, and then still having your documentation that there was a weapon,
this happened.
Right, we did it, and you're still ensuring that the parents are notified, because that's the other piece, is we can't have it reoccurring. At that point, then it's like, okay, this isn't an accident, then intent comes into question, because you've now done it 3 times.
Right.
So,
Or 2, I mean.
yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
So, I think we can play around with this. I know you have to go, so just for
I do.
clarifying, we're not.
I will be back.
Oh yeah, you have a 1 o'clock, right?
Yes.
1 o'clock. Am I missing something? Well,
Brooke's meeting with Bob now,
oh,
and then she said she wanted to meet with me over what she and Bob did.
mm,
So I said it was gonna be sent out to all the board members,
okay.
but if you wanna come back for that, you're more
Yep,
than
I
welcome.
have actually 1 o'clock appointment. I have to.
So are we done?
I have to be at.
Yes, please.